China, driving those ticket sales higher. But as the growing tariff tit-for-tat between the U.S. and China shows no signs of slowing down, Beijing's going beyond cash.
Trade war is spreading to Hollywood and the film industry. Beijing is putting new restrictions on the number of American movies that can be shown in China.
The world of cinema has always been characterized by gripping stories, giant studios, and big-budget productions. But lately, behind the spotlighted box office records and glitzy premieres, a completely different kind of tension is emerging. The impact of trade tensions between China and the US on the movie industry. Once described as the world's most exciting market, China was a goldmine for American studios. In 2024, American productions earned about $3.5 billion from the Chinese box office, making this market indispensable for Hollywood. The next target was to approach $4 billion by 2025. However, in the face of a toughening of US trade sanctions and tariffs, China retaliated in kind, announcing that it would increase import restrictions on American films. Now the question remains, could this conflict shake Hollywood's global dominance? The crux of the matter is the potential for billions of dollars of box office to be sacrificed to a political showdown. In 2024, $3.5 billion of the $42 billion in worldwide movie receipts came from American films in China alone. Special reports suggest that in 2025, this figure could be as low as $2.5 billion. This is because the Chinese government, in response to the recent tariffs, is signaling that we will reduce the number of US productions and lower the distribution quota. More precisely, while 34 American films had the right to be released in China in 2024, this number is likely to drop to 25, perhaps even lower. That's a big dent in the studio's bottom line. Data on the planning of major studios shows that for every $1 billion in box office revenue the US loses in this market, the financing of major projects becomes more difficult. The figures show that in 2024, Hollywood's 15 highest budget productions will have an average production cost of around $190 million. Most of these films are targeting worldwide grosses of $600–700 million. Many analysts remind us that the Chinese box office provides at least 25% of this target. If there are now right of entry restrictions or release dates cancelled at the last minute, a box office loss of $100–150 million per movie may turn into a picture that no one will be surprised by. This tension was largely sparked by the US president's trade moves. After additional tariffs were imposed, especially in the fields of electronics, agriculture, and high-tech, the Beijing administration started to say, we will also make a counter-move. The first retaliations were directed against agricultural imports, then shifted to technological products. Now, cultural exports, namely American movies, are at the center of the discussion. It seems that China is using Hollywood as a cudgel to respond to Trump's actions. According to the figures in a decision announced in March 2025, China intends to impose tariffs of up to 125% on products imported from the US. Although one might think that cinema is not a material product per se, it is quite possible to cut imports through indirect means such as quota reduction and higher taxes. According to statistics, between 2019 and 2023, the number of movie theaters in China increased by 35% to more than 70,000. During this time, the Chinese box office of American films was growing steadily. 2024 was the year of the break, when Chinese authorities put the brakes on Hollywood for the first time by giving domestic productions more theaters and calendar advantages. Hollywood's share dropped from 42% to 38%. Nevertheless, US productions still earned a respectable $3.5 billion. But now, with the tariffs and the rest of the tariffs, 30–40% of that $3.5 billion could be gone in 2025 and beyond. Some studio executives say, our estimate is to go down to around $2 to $2.2 billion, which means a loss of almost $1 billion. There are predictions within the industry, such as mid-budget movies will be less affected by the big blockbuster. Because blockbusters are invested a lot, huge profits are expected, and a significant part of this profit comes from the Chinese box office. Medium-sized films, on the other hand, may not experience a dramatic decline, as they are produced mostly for the US and European markets and are seen as bonus income in Asia. Still, the current transformation is challenging, as studios have operated on a big production, worldwide record formula for the last 10 years. Some producers may want to drop the strategy of 3 to 4 giant movies a year and focus more on small and medium-sized projects. On the other hand, diplomatic moves such as positively portraying Chinese characters or including Chinese stars in the scripts of American films are not new. Throughout the 2010s, studios are said to have even changed movie content to play nice with Beijing. For example, references to China in a sci-fi production were toned down during production. What is happening now is not just about content, but about political confrontations. In other words, the studios are saying, no matter how many scenes we shoot with pandas, if there is a tax war, Beijing will still restrict it. Beyond commercial concerns, this reflects the cultural dimension of the strategic rivalry between the two states. Trade tensions between the US and China threaten Hollywood's global reach, the report says, adding that declining box office share could reduce studios' appetite for risk in future projects. Because even if a superhero movie with a budget of $250 million makes $400 million in the US market without the Chinese box office, the global total will barely reach $600 million and the profit margin will shrink. Investors who provide financing for these projects are pushing the studios by saying, we need a guaranteed portfolio. As a result, perhaps because of the US-China friction, putting money into big movies may diminish, and Hollywood may return to the 1990s era of surviving on mid-level movies. Another point of curiosity is, can digital platforms make up for the lost profits from the Chinese box office? The undeniable truth is that platforms like Netflix or Amazon Prime have very limited official licenses to operate in China. Some are attracting unofficial viewers through channels such as Hong Kong or VPN, but there is no full Netflix access. Disney Plus is also not openly available on the mainland. This virtually eliminates the option of we'll make up the shortfall with digital profits. Maybe audiences will turn to piracy sites, which means zero revenue for the studios. So the short answer to will digital be the alternative savior is unfortunately no. Trump's tariffs act as a catalyst, reflecting the tariff war touching all sectors. According to the official statement, Trump specifically said he was imposing tariffs on imports of electronics, telecommunications, and semiconductors. But even without an official tariff on cultural products, Beijing is being strategic. If you attack our goods, we will impose quotas on your movies. We are cutting imports and allocating more theatres for domestic films, say officials from the State Administration of Cinema, both retaliating economically and paving the way for Chinese directors and producers. The numerical repercussions of these steps will be seen in 2025. By that date, 9-10 major American productions are expected to be cancelled in China or receive a very late release. In the Hollywood lobbies, there are opinions such as, if we are losing the Chinese market, then let's focus on the Indian market. India has a huge audience of moviegoers, but since Bollywood dominates, the market share of American films may still be limited. According to 2024 figures, American films in India brought in around $400 million, which is very small compared to the $3.5 billion in China. Even if it is just growing, the language and culture barrier is also in effect there. Therefore, it is difficult to close that gap in a short time. Even South Korea or Japan, despite their enthusiasm, do not have half the box office potential of China. Against this backdrop, Hollywood is faced with the decision of whether to back down and be patient or seek special deals with Beijing. The so-called heavyweights of many studios, brands like Marvel, DC, animation giants, etc., were used to earning $100–150 million per movie in China. Now it is scary to go down to maybe 50 million, maybe zero. With this in mind, will the productions of 2025-2026 give up on the China factor at the script stage, or will they again take acceptable to China stances? Some want to take a stance by saying, the retaliation is already too big. There's no point in cozying up to Beijing on the sets. Others may hope that, what if this crisis passes, and continue with the so-called China pandering. It's all about trade war and diplomacy. These turmoil in the US entertainment industry also undermines the slogan, Made in Hollywood, because until today, Hollywood was considered the locomotive of US cultural exports. According to official records, in 2024, US cultural exports totaled around $200 billion, of which $6.8 billion came from films and television programs. With China accounting for $2.2 billion of the market, this is a slice of the market that cannot easily be given up. The big movie companies are getting their lobbyists in Washington to say, you talk about agriculture and manufacturing, but what about the cultural sector? Protect us too. Lobbying spending is estimated to increase by 28% in 2024. Despite this, it is unclear whether Trump will bend. Maybe the agricultural card will come first in the negotiations and movies will remain a lower priority. Recently, there has already been a slight decline in Hollywood movie exhibition revenue in China. According to figures, it had fallen from $3.8 billion to $3.5 billion in 2023. Some experts attribute this to the rise of domestic productions even before the tariffs. At the beginning of 2024, it remained stable, hovering around $3.5 billion. Now that it's back to $2.5 billion or less, officials at the American Motion Picture Association AMPA warn, and with our domestic box office stagnant in recent years, the biggest movies may not be financed without this additional revenue. This could break the big budget, big revenue spiral. The situation on digital platforms is also uncertain. Some studios are trying to figure out if it's banned in theaters, do we go online? But Chinese digital platforms are also under state control. If a movie can't enter the theater, it is difficult for it to enter the digital platform. Maybe with sporadic deals, but reaching large audiences is not as easy as before. Figures indicate that by the end of 2024, the number of online video viewers in China will be 980 million. Again, a huge number. It is theoretically possible to expect $300–400 million of digital revenue from here, but there are practical obstacles. After all, Beijing could say, as long as you increase tariffs, we won't give you a share of our content market. This landscape fits perfectly with the thesis that trade tensions between the US and China threaten Hollywood's global reach. When all the data comes together, studios estimate that as much as 30% of the $3.5 billion share in 2024 could evaporate in 2025. That's a net loss of at least $1 billion or less. Some scenarios suggest a loss of up to $1.3–1.5 billion. These figures may not be a blow that could bring even the giant studios to their knees, but they increase the production risk considerably. After all, with a budget of $200–250 million for a single blockbuster, even a small deviation can wipe out all profits. In these times, even though the Trump administration says the US economy is great, we will win, there seems to be no winner in the trade war. Different sectors are being hit in different ways, and Hollywood is facing unexpectedly heavy retaliation in the field of culture and entertainment. American executives say, unfortunately, these filmmakers take a back seat at the diplomatic table. When it comes to national security, cinema is secondary, they lament. This perhaps explains why there is no official compensation for the movie industry, while even the agricultural sector receives additional support packages. Each company will take care of itself. Maybe if tensions ease in the coming period, the door to the Chinese market will open again, experts say. But for at least a year or two until the end of 2025, the US will not back down on its tariffs, and China will resist import restrictions. During this time, the Hollywood box office in China will fall to $2–2.5 billion, while the share of domestic films will increase. Moreover, the audience's habituation to American movies may even weaken. If a generation turns to local productions, it will take effort for Hollywood to regain that share. The numbers show that in the 2023-2024 season, 5 domestic films from China grossed over $200 million, an unprecedented achievement. A Chinese action movie called Super Break alone grossed $310 million in the domestic market. This accelerates the decline of Hollywood's share there. Of course, Trump's trade war deepens threat to US brands in China is not unique to cinema, but the movie industry is of great symbolic importance as cultural soft power and commercial value converge. Hollywood was the machine that brought the American dream to the global screen. Now Beijing is saying, you can't just run roughshod over my market. In the net share from movie theaters, US studios normally get 25% of the box office revenue, while the Chinese side keeps 75%. Still, it's not an unprofitable business because it's a market that sells millions of tickets. Now there is no ticket share, no legislation. Everything is changing. As a result, Trump's tariff wars, Beijing's retaliation, and Hollywood's global strategy are intertwined. New data tells us that by 2025, American films will suffer perhaps a billion-dollar drop at the Chinese box office. The reduction of the quota from 34 to 2025 is upsetting the plans of the studios. At a time when domestic productions are booming in China, digital platforms are being blocked, and there is talk of tariff pressure on movie imports. Hollywood giants find themselves in a new trade trench. While some say let's shift resources to other markets and digital, projections say they cannot close a gap as big as China. Perhaps the market that brought in $3.5 billion in revenue in 2024 will drop to less than $2 billion for US films in 2026. Hollywood would then find it hard to live up to the label of global hegemon. Yet, despite all this uncertainty, the studios are sending the message that we will survive with different strategies. Who knows? Maybe diplomacy will step in, tensions will ease, and Hollywood will return to China. Or, on the contrary, the customs war will become permanent and everyone will have to stick to their own markets. For now, the picture shows that cold winds are blowing in one of the biggest markets of the movie world.